Hi, my name is Boston and I want to make a brief outline on post-structuralism. Post-structuralism is a late 20th century movement in philosophy and literary criticism, which is difficult to summarize, but which generally defines itself in its opposition to the popular structuralism movement which proceeded in the 1950s and 1960s in France. It is closely related to postmodernism, although the two concepts are not synonymous. In the post-structuralist approach to textual analysis, the reader replaces the author as the primary subject of inquiry, and without a central fixation on the author, post-structuralists examine other sources for meaning, which are therefore never authoritative and promise no consistency. A reader's culture and society then share at least an equal part in the interpretation of a piece to the cultural and social circumstances of the author. Some of the key assumptions underlying post-structuralism include the concept of self as a single and coherent entity is a fictional construct. An individual rather comprises conflicting tensions and knowledge claims, for example, gender, class, profession, etc., and the interpretation of meaning of a text is therefore dependent on the reader's own personal concept of self. Then the author's intent and meaning, although the author's own identity as a stable self with a single discernible intent is also a fictional construct, is secondary to the meaning that the reader perceives in a literary text, or indeed any situation where a subject perceives a sign has no single proposed meaning or existence. It is also necessary to utilize a variety of perspectives to create a multifaceted interpretation of a text, even if these interpretations conflict with one another. Post-structuralism emerged in France during the 1960s, a period of political turmoil, rebellion, and disillusionment with traditional values, accompanied by a resurgence of interest in feminism, Western Marxism, phenomenology, and nihilism. Many prominent post-structuralists, such as Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, and Roland Barthes, were initially structuralists, but later came to explicitly reject most of structuralism claims, particularly its notion of the fixity of the relationship between the signifier and the signified, but also the overall grandness of the theory, which seemed to promise everything and yet not quite to deliver. In his 1966 lecture Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of the Human Science, Jacques Derrida was one of the first to propose some theoretical limitations to structuralism and identified an apparent destabilizing or decentering in intellectual life, which came to be known as post-structuralism. Roland Barthes, originally a confirmed structuralist, published his The Death of the Author in the 1968, in which he argues that any literary text has multiple meanings and that the author was not the prime source of the work's semantic content. In his 1967 work, Elements of Semiology, he also advanced the concept of the meta-language, a systematized way of talking about concepts like meaning and grammar beyond the constraints of traditional first-order language. Thank you very much. Subscribe and see you in the next video.